The world has set some pretty ambitious goals for 2030, but one of them is in serious trouble. And if it fails, it could bring all the others crashing down like a line of dominoes. Today, we're going to dig into the hidden crisis facing Sustainable Development Goal 10 and why we absolutely need to be paying attention to it right now.
Look, the stakes really couldn't be any higher. This is not just one goal among many. Its success is tangled up with everything else, from ending poverty to fighting climate change. If this one collapses, it threatens the entire 2030 agenda. This isn't just about abstract numbers. This is about real-world stability for all of us. So what is this critical goal we're talking about? Let's jump right into the heart of the problem.
It's Sustainable Development Goal 10, Reduced Inequalities. And right now, it is one of the worst performing of all the SDGs. Seriously, global progress has basically ground to a halt. In a lot of places, we're actually going backwards.
So what's going on? Well, it's pretty much a perfect storm. The COVID-19 pandemic and the global inflation crisis have just poured gasoline on the fire of inequality. And we're not just talking about income and wealth, we're talking about who gets to live and who dies. And as that gap between rich and poor countries gets wider, it puts other critical goals, like ending poverty or ensuring good health, in real jeopardy. But here's the part that's really worrying. The official story, the picture we're being shown, it isn't even the full picture. Actually, it's dangerously incomplete. Okay, so let's start with what we do know. When you look at global income, the richest 10% of people on this planet take home 52% of all the income. Now, what about the poorest half of humanity? They get just 8.5%. That's already a pretty staggering imbalance, right? But just wait, because it gets so much more extreme. Now let's switch from income, what people earn, to wealth, which is what people own. Get this, the richest 10% own a staggering 76% of all global wealth, and the poorest half of the world, they own just 2%. No, that is not a typo, 2%. This right here is the true scale of the disparity we're dealing with. So you have to ask the question, right? If the gap is this huge, why isn't this the lead story everywhere? Why does the official narrative so often feel kind of muted, maybe even a little too optimistic? Well, the answer comes down to how we're measuring it. The official tool for SDG10 is something called shared prosperity, and it has a fatal flaw. It only looks at whether the income of the poorest 40% is growing faster than the average. It completely, totally ignores what's happening at the very top, which means we're not seeing the whole alarming picture. And this is a perfect way to think about it. Using that shared prosperity metric is like trying to fight a skyscraper fire by only checking the bottom floors for a little smoke, all while the penthouse is hoarding all the water and the real inferno is raging up on the top floors. You see the problem? If you ignore what's happening at the top, the entire building is at risk of coming down. Okay, so if our main tool is broken, what are the right ones for the job? Let's take a look at how we can get a much clearer diagnosis and, actually start to fix this thing. This slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got that flawed view, shared prosperity, which is only seeing a tiny piece of the puzzle. On the other side, you've got what the experts actually use to see the full picture, things called the Gini coefficient and the Palma ratio. These tools look at everybody and directly compare the richest with the poorest. So what's the Gini coefficient? It's basically just a score from 0 to 1. 0 means perfect equality. Everyone has the exact same income. 1 means perfect inequality. One person has all the money. It gives us one single, powerful number to see how things are distributed across the entire population. Simple. And the Palma ratio? It's even more direct. It just asks a simple question. How much more does the richest 10% of people make compared to the poorest 40%? That's it. It's a direct measurement of the gap between the top and the bottom, getting right to the heart of the matter. And by using these better tools, we can set some really clear and ambitious targets. The goal should be a Gini coefficient of 0.25. That's the level that organizations like the IMF say is best for sustained economic growth. And that translates to a Palma ratio of 1, which just means the top 10% earns the exact same amount in total as the bottom 40%. This isn't some fantasy. It's a concrete, achievable target for a much fairer world. But here's the thing. To hit these targets, we need way better data. Most of the data we have is old, and we don't get it very often. We need a data revolution. And what that means is every country needs to track this stuff annually,
combining household surveys with tax records so we can finally get an accurate, timely picture of what's really happening at the top.
Now, having the right data is one thing, but what do we do with it? This brings us to the most important part of this whole story, the solutions. Because the level of inequality we see today is not an accident. I just want to let this quote sink in for a second. Inequality is not inevitable. It is a policy choice. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful idea, right? It means that if we're in this mess because of choices we've made, well, then we can get out of it by making different, better choices. And the great news is we already have the playbook. These aren't just theories. These are proven policies that work. It all starts with fair public spending on things we all need, like health and education. And how do we pay for it? With progressive taxation, making sure the wealthiest pay their fair share. You back that up with stronger labor policies, like fair minimum wages and the right to unionize, plus critical investment in the care economy. And the golden rule that ties it all together? Every single policy has to be designed to leave no one behind.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it leaves us with a surprisingly clear path forward to build a much fairer world by 2030.
And let's not forget why this is so unbelievably critical. Tackling inequality isn't just one goal on a long list. Success on SDG10 is like the master key that unlocks progress on almost all the other goals, from poverty and hunger to health and even climate action.
So let's just boil it all down. The path to reviving SDG10 is a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, use the right data so we can see the whole picture. Second, set ambitious, meaningful targets that actually aim for fairness. And third, implement the proven policies that we already know can close the gap.
So it all comes down to this. We have the tools, we know what the targets should be, the policy playbook is written and ready to go. The only question left, and it's the biggest one of all, is do we have the collective will to actually make it happen?